Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of PodSaveChocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and moderator. And today I'm really happy to be able to have join me both Friederike and Ali Gower, who are the founders of Chocolate Tree in Scotland. Before we go there, I want to remind everybody that this episode of PodSaveChocolate, like every episode, is sponsored by you, the members of the Chocolate Life. So here's the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go there, click on a green button to sign up. And for every episode of PodSaveChocolate, I put together a post. And this is the post for today's episode. And you've got the run of show listed here and links and resources. You don't have to follow along closely and get the actual URLs. You can just go to the post at any point and interact with the content that I provide here. I also want to point out that if you go into the comments, whether on YouTube, LinkedIn, the live chat on YouTube, but the comments on LinkedIn or Facebook, you can let me know where in the world you're connecting from. And you can also ask a question of my guest today. And with that, it's time to bring up onto stage Friederike and Ali Gower of Chocolate Tree in Scotland. How are you both today?
Yeah, good.
Pretty good. Yeah. Friday feeling today. So we just
well, and for anybody who is unaware of what the Friday feeling is, it's a reference, as I understand it, to a Cadbury Flake bar. Is that correct?
Oh, I have no idea.
No.
So you might want to go. You might want to go look that up just for this. But anyway, it's great. It's great to have you both here. Now, in my research, getting started on this, just doing some background, I went to the About page, and you guys started up in 2005?
Yeah.
Yeah, we started in 2005, put around music festivals with a traveling chocolaterie for fun. I don't know if we really ever thought it would go to where it's gone today. So we did a few summers where we were just having fun and making friends, and one thing led to another, and wow, cacao and chocolate became our life.
Yeah.
It has a way of doing that for sure. But when you started off, I mean, it was confections. I mean, or did you start off with making cocoa from beans from the very beginning?
We bought an organic Belgian chocolate, as you would at the time, and we made chocolates. That is truffles, gateaus, cakes, bars very early on, as well as ice cream and waffles, hot chocolate, a lot.
The cafe was a hoot. We had everything going on, from showing Willy Wonka to chocolate puddings, and all of this was being made in a field somewhere in the middle of nowhere. We drive everything out there, so it was really just this creative wonder space that we began with, and we've learned a lot over the years. But yeah, always organic, fair trade. But we didn't work with beans until 2011, and that was kind of the first time we heard of machines that would do that part of the process.
So, what I will do, because it didn't occur to me to do this, what I'll do is I'll go to Google Maps, and I'll find Pembroke, right? And I'll put a little screenshot up so people can get an idea about where it is relative to the rest of the world, because it's fairly north, as I remember looking at the map, right?
Where we're located. You mean where we're located here in Scotland?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in Haddingtonshire, near Sunny Dunny, as we call it, which is the sunniest part of East Lothian.
Of Scotland.
Of Scotland. And we have some sunshine here. So absolutely pop up the map and we can find out the factory is. That'd be super cool.
Yeah, I'll put that in the post. But before you got into the chocolaterie business back in 2005, did either of you have a chefing background or a pastry background, or it was just like, oh, I want to go do this? I mean,
I had a passion for chocolate.
Well, Friederike is from Germany, where you have to go through undertake really like courses and be trained to become a chocolatier or a Konditormeister or to work with pastry. So when she came to Scotland, it was like this free reign to be creative and to start a business without needing any of that formal education. So I would say Friederike was informally trained.
Since I was 5 years old.
Where did that come from? I mean, tell us.
Home baking was my family, really. It was my grandmother and my mother. Just all sorts of things. So, yeah.
Apart from the family connection, were there other inspirations that you could point to in terms of pastry chefs or chocolates that you loved?
Maybe not quite chocolate, but my hometown is Lübeck, and it's famous for marzipan. And so it's got some really good cafes as well.
Yeah, the cakes in the beginning were these fantastic, like German gâteaux and things. And we'd use chocolate, and chocolate became this focal point. We were always called Chocolate Tree. It was always the main core thing we were interested in. But we discovered chocolates along the way, which I think you and your audience will have had the same experience that make you go, wow, what was I missing? Because I'd gone through all of my childhood by this point. I'm in my 20s, and I'm trying dark chocolates that are making this just this wonderful flavors and this totally different kind of idea about chocolate. So it was as much of an adventure and an exciting thing to get into for us as I think it has been for a lot of people.
So if I'm thinking back to around 2011, which is when you started experimenting with making from cocoa beans, I mean, at this point, there are some of the early makers in the UK. I'm thinking specifically of Duffy. I believe, Duffy's Red Star is there.
Yeah, so cool. He invited us down to his factory when we said, hey, we're thinking about doing this food. And he invited us in the doors and just took us through his process, and has still a very good friend today.
He has been an inspiration to, I think, most of the UK community that came in or after him, no matter where you are located in the country. It's still, so it's early in the sense of the bean to bar / craft chocolate movement in the UK. Right? Thinking back to those early days, what do you think, apart from the fact that you needed to figure out, you're sideways now. Are you guys on your phone?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, so it's auto rotated. Yep.
Better. I'll try and keep an eye on that.
But now you're horizontal. It
was early. Started as soon as we could. We saw what was happening West Coast of America. Wow. Okay, this is the way.
Gotcha. So, thinking about that time, so I first met Todd Masonis in Paris, who's one of the founders of Dandelion, sort of in October, November of 2010, before they launched. I'm sorry?
Lovely guy, Todd.
Yeah.
First person I know in a self-driving car. Living that life in San Francisco. So I have a lot of respect for those guys too. Dandelion really opened up their books and showed a lot of us how to experiment, and we're always very grateful for that too.
So I know that one of the things that you're both very interested in, and are you drinking scotch by any chance? I saw Fred was drinking water. Oh, it's apple juice. Darn. I know that from our discussions, because I think we met in person for the first time in London at the London Chocolate Show at maybe Olympia or maybe Covent Garden, if you were there. I don't remember. So it would have been 2015, 16, 17, something like that.
Would have been in the Covent Garden. Yeah, I remember meeting you back then, and that was still is exciting time. A lot of water's gone under the bridge as well. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm trying to get a sense is, in making the transition from being a chocolatier to a from the bean chocolate maker, one of the things that you had was this tension in your business, which is that some of your product you produced from chocolate that you made, and some of your product you produced from chocolate that you bought in. I mean, still the idea is organic, fair trade. It was just, whether you started with beans or whether you started with chocolate. So how did you navigate that? Because it is a challenge, I think, for many makers. I mean, does everything I have to sell have to start with chocolate that I make? Right. And this is something that you navigated for the first, 6, 7, 8, 9, well, longer than that of your business. So, how did that work for you?
Well, to start with, we really needed to educate our audience along the way, because people didn't know what meant that you could make chocolate, because they assumed we already did that beforehand.
Yeah, that's the first thing we say to people. Hey, we started making our own chocolate, and they go, "Well, what were you doing beforehand?"
Yeah.
And then you realize there's this whole problem that people don't understand the processes behind these chocolate brands.
Because up to then, all the chocolatiers in Britain or everywhere were kind of making the customers assume that they would make their own chocolate. They never talked about the origin or
This
anything.
still goes on today. There's a lot of
Yeah.
brands inferring that they do a lot more than they do. And so it's a really important question, Clay. And for us, it was clear from the beginning that we need to differentiate between chocolate we make from bean to bar from chocolate that we make from couverture. And in 2018, we stopped using couverture altogether and moved over to using paste. So we had bean to bar and paste to bar. And we still keep those ranges completely different. But recently we had moved our entire production to bean to bar, and it solves that fuss that you mentioned we've been having, because it's been a difficult thing for us to have a clearer marketing message and to carefully try and not let those things overlap. And now it's a lot easier because everything's from beans.
Also, we would have loved to transition a lot earlier, but we just couldn't produce the amounts of chocolate needed to take our core business, which was the organic chocolate bars with different inclusions and toppings. And we could also not do it financially, because we would have effectively had to double the price, because we would have made it really small scale. So that wasn't really an option along the way. It was either drop most of the business and do what we're passionate about only, or carry along the business along the way and use that to finance investment into the bean to bar side of it.
To answer that question, I don't think you need to be one thing or the other. I just think you need to be honest and clear about how you market and sell your product.
And our packaging
you have to have a commercial sense.
Styles were always very, very different looking in the packaging. So any of the really colorful tessellations and patterns, they only appear on the bean to bar ones, with the words bean to bar on the front, and everything else says what it's made from.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I want to explain to everybody who's watching this that one of the reasons I invited, Ali and Friederike to be here with me today is an email exchange that you and I had, Ali, starting about 2 months ago, around a new initiative which is being put together by some people around, how can we get there to be a standard marketing message around bean to bar, what that means. But also, there is a UK chocolate company whose name I will mention, called Ocelot, who's calling themselves Kraft. But what they're doing is they're purchasing couverture from Original Beans, right? Who actually isn't a bean to bar chocolate maker. They have their chocolate made for them by Felklin. And so Ocelot is twice removed from the source of the chocolate, even though Original Beans might be sourcing the beans.
I mean, this is an example of one company who has misled their customers by inferring that they make the chocolate and using the term craft chocolate, which I believe is enabled by their parent company, Original Beans. And I think we disagree on the term craft chocolate. I think a lot of us do not agree that craft chocolate, Original Beans chocolate made by Felklin, is craft chocolate. The definition of craft chocolate seems to be unanimously kind of synonymous with the definition of bean to bar, which is how I learned about it in the West Coast of America in 2010, when you had companies like Dick Taylor, Woodblock, and these guys beginning this craft chocolate movement. It was exclusively bean to bar. And so I still feel that's what it should be. But Original Beans have a big mission to change the type of cacao that's being used, and they have an opportunity to get more couverture into the hands of chocolatiers instead of the big industrial kind of awful stuff. Calibo. We can look at the chocolate scorecard results to see the differences of these companies. So there's a great opportunity for companies who have a process turning cacao through to their chocolate using a big industrial factory like Felklin to get more of that chocolate into the market, into the hands of chocolatiers. What's wrong is just stepping into the realm and the space of craft chocolate and confusing everything by using those terms disingenuously.
Yeah.
So yeah, we kind of, I mean, the word is we call bullshit on it.
Yeah.
And like we'll continue to do that when we see misleading marketing that affects consumers.
They didn't only use the word craft chocolate, they also referred to themselves as chocolate makers rather than chocolatiers or working with chocolate.
It's riding the petticoat
Yeah.
tails of
Yeah.
a lot of hard work. And there's a lot of people, and you know them too, Clay. We're in really a community of really great people doing really great work. So there's nothing wrong with using couverture, but there's something wrong with inferring that you're doing much more than that and that you're doing a bean to bar process.
Well, I think that there's another aspect of this that is not entirely clear, which is Ocelot is owned by Original Beans, right? And so they actually don't disclose that relationship either, which
There's a lot
is
of smoke and mirrors, and there's a lot of it's not transparent.
well, I think that it's also unnecessary, which is, I mean, the story is a good story, right? There's
Yeah.
no why try to spin a different story.
Exactly.
And if I want to make a point to everybody who's watching this, is that in this day and age of the internet, it is literally impossible to hide. You know,
Right.
somebody is going to find out the truth,
Isn't
and
that-
you have no reason to do that.
Totally. Like the ability for us to be transparent now through the technology we have is fantastic in so many ways. And just coming back from Bamba in Peru, where we bought 4 tons of cacao beans, and I have WhatsApp numbers and I have communication with people at the origin. And it's like the technology has changed so much in the past few years. There's some really wonderful, good things that come out of that. And sorry, to speak more of the point, like you just can't hide because information is accessible and everywhere. And that, you know, that's great.
So, you know, it's absolute, but to have this, you know, to have this strategy, to have thought it through is really important. So, you know, what I'm doing now is I'm showing the in under excuse me, about on your website under the navigation here, there's a cacao sourcing page.
Yeah.
And you stroll down here, and you know, this is something that very few chocolate makers do, right? Which is they will actually list all the different sources of
Yeah.
the beans. Right?
Yeah, why not? We're
And
really proud of everybody we source from, and we like to mention their Instagram handles when we talk about them, even the intermediary partners, to give a real description of what direct trade is, rather than trying to beef it up and make it more than what it is. It already is enough. Like, and that's the case for some of our competitors too. You're doing enough. Like, celebrate what you're doing and make that the main focus. So we're celebrating those partners that we have where we source our cacao and really just trying to get an authentic story across to people, because I really think that's what people want.
I'm hoping that, you know, so I think that in order to be able to make the kinds of changes that we want to see happen at the farm level, what we need to do is we need to get people to preferentially purchase specialty chocolate. Right? Because if they purchase specialty chocolate, what that will do is it will drive up the demand for specialty cocoa beans. Right? But there is always this connection to the farm. Cocoa is an agricultural product that we need to be very, very clear about. And you know, I know enough about this. You know, I know the founders of Good Gaia Cacao. I know the founders of Agrofloresta. You know, I know that Marañón is Peru. I know that Norandino is Peru. I know, you know, what it is that Uncommon does. And so there is an opportunity for someone, you know, an educational opportunity for somebody to go and learn more about these companies. The only thing I would say is you've got a bunch of images there, and they might want to be links to the company's websites. We're here on the internet, right? I can.
So we'll get the links to those links underneath those images to each of those companies, but it needs a refresh. Cacao Tallies, my close friend and sourcing partner, passed away, and he's still on there.
Oh,
so yeah, we've had some some new ones, and there's intermediary partners that I'm really happy to mention, because when you look into all these companies and their own websites, you see the good work that they're doing. So I believe in, collaborative growth with all of our partners, and we're very selective about who we work with, and we know that our customers would be really happy with the choices we made. 100%.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm scrolling through the page, which is one of the reasons why I'm looking off to the side. I'm going, oh, I've actually been in Chilelique. I know exactly where that is. Flying to Peru, you take that, road east towards Chulucanas on your way to Amazonas. It's nice to have been there.
Best
Obviously,
ceviche in Peru. Absolutely the best ceviche in that little part of Peru.
well, it's a good thing we don't have any Ecuadorians here, because the Ecuadorians would say no, right? Tomato-based ceviche is the best.
Peru. So there might be other ones.
This information, this is just blog posts and images that I've taken, and we can do more. I think chocolate makers are doing more like this, and it's great. It kind of then means when you do find a company and you pop up, and quite common here is to use Casa Lucar Couverture. There's a company that uses the term farm to bar, which is really quite rude, because farm to bar producers who have a small farm and produce cacao and ferment dry and turn that cacao into chocolate and bring it to the market, they're just being undermined by Cox & Co., this British company that uses the term farm to bar. So getting this stuff onto our website and being able to kind of provide these stories and information to our people is super important, because it differentiates us. And then when you do find a website that's got the standard, Casa Lucar picture, or something that's obviously been taken from one of their suppliers, and you can read between the lines. I think, most consumers are pretty intelligent, and they can tell the difference when they know what to look for.
If they're looking.
And if they're, they know to look.
So that educational component is really interesting. You have a retail shop, people walk in, right, and you have an opportunity. So the average person, I assume that most of the people are Scottish who come into the facility. What's the hardest educational aspect of this for you? I mean, they're there, so they bought into something already.
Well, we don't have a shop, so we gave up our shop 2 years ago. We did have a shop for 10 years. It was a wonderful experience, and we learned a lot. But we decided in 2019 to focus on wholesale. That was fantastic from a pandemic point of view, because of a number of reasons.
We made it so much easier.
So we've just been doing wholesale since 2019. Now, at this point, I'm frustrated with the wholesale market, because retailers, wholesalers should know better. They should know more about the chocolate they're sourcing and bringing into their shelves. But they don't. They really don't know the differences and the nuances, which are not just small differences. They're quite important. Like, a lot of the brands are remelting Casa Lucar chocolate, and it's just the same chocolate remelted in different brand formats on a shelf. And the retailer doesn't realize that it's all from the same place in Colombia. There's so much more opportunity for diversity, for flavor, for, differences when we look at craft. So I'm encouraging retailers now to look at having a craft chocolate section, to differentiate between the two, and to know what they're putting on their shelves. One of the biggest ones we have here is kind of, people are in uproar about a little bit, is Hue, which is a kind of health chocolate, organic, fair trade brand, which got a lot of traction in the health food space, and it's in a lot of whole food markets, or like small independent whole food shops. And these people have no idea this brand is now owned by Mondelez, which is one of the biggest, most ugliest, worst offenders for sustainability and ethics of a chocolate company in the world. And when they find this out, they feel angry, they feel annoyed, because they've been cheated. This is a brand that they've got on board with. They thought, this is great, I like this chocolate. And when they pop open the bonnet and find out it's not that, then people want change. So I think it's a good time for retailers to be looking at changing up their chocolate selection, because there's so much more available. There's now like 45, 50 chocolate makers in the UK. And we were just saying, back in 2011, there were 2 or 3. So I just think it's really exciting times for chocolate.
I've felt that way since 2001 when I started doing this. It's exciting times. It's differently exciting.
Yeah.
I've always been an observer. I've never been a maker with a business, right? But thinking about the cost of cocoa and all the business complexities, here in the United States, tariffs are and uncertainty around the tariffs. It's not just the tariffs; it's uncertainty is making things pretty crazy. So let's use that as a segue to get into tasting, right? Because I think I got 6 bars here. There's a lot of stuff to taste. Hopefully, you have the bars there as well. But I do want to talk. But I do want to talk about. The artwork, because I look at this and I think it's like influenced by Escher. So I look at the tessellations and I go, that's what I think. Yeah. So
I use 70-gram bars too. These are nice big bars. And here we have the turpial, which is the Venezuelan national bird. Freddie is designing all of our tessellations using pen and paper, graph paper, and so you thought that mathematics degree would never come in handy. All the time, and this is one of the most fun things to do with it.
Yeah.
So you tell us a bit more.
Well,
I'm actually surprised the wallpaper behind you isn't a tessellation.
Much. If our wallpapered with our parents, I think I'd go crazy, even more crazy. Tell us more about them.
I think early on we just thought we really needed to design our own background pattern, or we were looking at artists, and then I just played around. I thought I could try and tessellate a llama, which is this one. And
Gotcha.
I based it almost on a knitting pattern and made it fit a bit. And it worked, and we went ahead with it. And then I had to do a few other ones. And now it's getting easier if you do more of them. But they are a bit of a mathematical challenge. So it's the bit of math, which is fun, which is to do with patterns and geometry a bit, permutations, all that kind of stuff. There's different ways of aligning the birds. Sometimes they're all upright and facing the same way, like our little monkey bar. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're faced in 6 different directions, but each shape is the same.
So you have a formal background in mathematics at uni or something like that? So you studied maths formally?
To study mathematics. But in my second year, I met Ali and we built the tent. So before I had even finished my degree, we were already running chocolatry at festivals.
Yeah. That's the type of geodesic thing that was also mathematics. I just want to show you a shopping bag. So this is our shopping bag at home, which is the parrots. Mm-hmm. And if you look on our website, we're also going into ultralight hiking gear. This is the next stage for chocolatry. We're becoming the Patagonia of chocolate, where we're using sustainable materials to make like ultra strong long distance hiking gear out of Friederike's parents. With beanie and a t-shirt wasn't going to be enough for us. So check out the merchandise page on our website.
So I know that in New Zealand, when you go cross country, it's called bush bashing. I lived there, so I did a fair amount of bush bashing, and I forget what the Brit term is for doing that kind of like walking across the moors. There's a special term for it, and I forget what it is.
Yeah, rambling. You're a rambler.
Okay, gotcha.
I like bushwhacking.
There's much bushwhacking.
I like bush bashing. Well, because the gorse, which is also, there's a lot of gorse in Scotland. I mean, the gorse runs wild, and you're usually pushing your way through the gorse in order to do that. But the geometry also extends to the mold.
Yeah, right on. So we have 3 designs which have been chosen for the molds, and the parrot, the quetzal, which is national bird of Guatemala, and
the toucan, which is the national bird of Belize. So we've always been inspired by the national animals of the countries where the cacao comes from, together with throwing in a few odd ones, like the unicorn for Scotland, a thistle.
That's our national animal.
It is. And just sometimes to reflect the flavor. So I put a squirrel on our Janduja bar.
And when you go to Bolivia, it will be a condor.
We had a condor as well, but not Well, we're using it for the whiskey bar, actually. Yeah, it's Andy and Kondo.
Right. But what I want to do is I changed the order. We're going to start off with the Bolivian 85% because it's, I think, the purest expression. Then we'll do the 40% Gianduja, the 60% dark milk Peru. We'll go to the 100% Guatemala. And then we'll do whiskey. We'll end on the Aztec spice because if we have the Aztec spice earlier, it'll probably ruin my palate for everything else. So, people may know about porcelana, and where it comes from, but they're off. I'm sorry?
Do they know the truth, though?
Does anybody know the truth at this point?
Go on. Sorry.
Which truth do they know?
No. What I'm saying is that they don't. So they understand that porcelana is a Spanish term for white, like porcelain surface, right? And so they get the idea that the beans, when you cut them over fresh, are very pale. So there's no, if they were even a little purple, we'd call them lila for lilac, right? Or dark through to dark purple. But the idea is, that what you end up with is a chocolate because of the lack of chemicals which turn the bean dark purple, right? You have something which, right away doesn't necessarily have the bitterness, which is associated with a Forastero bean, right? But what does that mean in terms of what we should expect from the aroma and flavor profile? Because definitely this is a bean you don't want to over roast. So, how did you approach this particular bean when you got it?
Correct. Well, everything there except I believe the porcelain is named after the surface of the skin of the pod, which is more porcelain, just as you say, like glossy than a typical cacao pod. But it also has a high concentration of white seeds. It is not to be confused with a concentration of white seeds from Peru or Bali or Thailand or anywhere else. It comes from Venezuela and exclusive to Venezuela, a genetic of porcelana, which has a very smooth pod, very pale. As you say, the roast is super important, like with many cacaos. That's where we have to basically not mess it up. And we do that with our
Isn't that the truth about all cocoa? Just don't mess it up.
Just don't mess it up. I mean, that's our one. You have one job as a chocolate maker of the cacao. So, with this beautiful cacao, the thing is, we have to start with good cacao to make good chocolate. And this is really beautiful cacao. It comes from Eraima Chacon. She's on the back of the pack. And all credit goes to this lady who, she only let me use the photograph because I promised her I will never mix that cacao with anything else and turn this to anything other than a pure porcelana from her cacao, which is genuine, authentic porcelana. You can show kind of images of the post-harvest and all of that. So with these beans, the roast is super important, and they are fairly big beans, but we don't want to roast for too long because, just like you said, you don't want to over roast these beans. But we do appreciate a little bit longer. And with our drum roast, can you remember? We don't mind telling you. Yeah. So we're happy with the results, though, and I believe it was like just short of 10 minutes, which sounds really short. But our roast profile style is to kind of go low and
actually high and short. Yeah. So when you have a bean and you roast the whole bean, is when you can get out the most complex flavor in making chocolate. So if you put the cocoa bean into a fairly high temperature environment, the outside of the bean cooks fairly quickly. And then we take it out before the inside is cooked all the way through. So we have more complex flavors than if we did it a longer, lower temperature, because then everything is more even. So especially if we have fruity cacao, which this one is not, you lose a lot of the complexity if you over roast it and it becomes a bit bland.
Yeah. So I haven't tasted it yet. I've done a smell. I mean, there is this sort of nutty forward chocolate to it.
Yeah,
right?
porcelain.
Which I think of as being porcelana, moving more towards the nut. It's not a peanut. It may be more like Brazil nut in terms of what's going on.
Okay. There's a little bit of bitterness there, which I would associate with the Brazil nut flavor.
Mhm. Right. So
See the color?
the snap is nice and crisp. The surface is perfect. Right.
So light, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean,
No chocolate.
It's an 85.
Yeah.
yeah. And what I would say is, this doesn't eat like an 85%. I mean, which is for people who are looking for higher cocoa content. This roast profile can really amp up
Yeah.
the
I like it bitter. It's like, well, you're not going to get it from porcelana because porcelana has not got all that stringency.
well, sometimes people try. It's just the house roast profile. They roast everything the same way, no matter what. It seems like there's a fairly high cocoa butter content on this.
Yeah, that comes from our location. So we're in Scotland, which means that the average room temperature is a lot lower than you would expect somewhere else. If we do any chocolate without added cocoa butter, it's got a tendency to taste chalky in our area.
Have you come across this? Is a theory. We're now exploring a theory with you that we have. We need less cocoa butter added. Cooler climates, we like more cocoa butter because the chocolate is smoother in our palate.
Well, I think so. So it could be that there are some cultural proclivities. You're in Scotland. You just prefer things to have a certain texture, which is different.
But we also experienced traveling when we had our dandelion chocolate bar in Edinburgh. It did taste less nice than it. Because it doesn't quite deliver here because it takes too much effort for the chocolate to melt in your mouth.
Right. So certainly one of these. I'm in Arizona, and outside right now, I'll go take a look at my phone and I'll go look outside right now. It's 24 degrees centigrade. So I'm in the low 70s, and it's going to get up to the mid 80s in a couple of days. But at night, I'm getting down to like below 5 degrees. Right. And so my challenge is I need to keep all of my chocolate within a fairly narrow range of temperature. Yeah. And so I do know that, that if I'm not careful about what the ambient temperature is, it's going to influence the way the chocolate melts. And the way the chocolate melts is going to influence the flavor of it. It's complicated because different cocoa butters have different melt points. Yeah. So you get what are called harder cocoa butters and softer cocoa butters, right? And so they are going to react differently in different locations. So a harder cocoa butter in a cold place is going to be different from a softer cocoa butter in a cold place. So there is that aspect of it. And I know that
brands, they have different chocolate bars for different parts of the world, different recipes, right?
Mm-hmm. And if they're adding cocoa butter, the cocoa butter that they're adding might not come from the location where the beans come from.
Yeah.
And now what you're doing is you're alloying fats. Sort of like you take, tin and copper and you make bronze. I think that's the combination. And bronze has a completely different.
Yeah.
Let's talk about cocoa butter. So we buy organic, deodorized Peruvian cocoa butter, and we use 8 to 10% in most of our recipes. It's a very European style, and one of my favorite chocolates ever was Bonin. And if you've had a Bonin bar, you know what I'm talking about. Like fat, heavy. And I just love that style. So we don't want to be that fat heavy. I mean, but we do feel like the mouth feel that we get, the temperature that we get. Don't forget, it's easier to work with. And we're never using less of things like chocolate. We never have that, like, for me, there's no craft chocolate that should have UPF less than ultra processed. Anyway, we've always used cocoa butter.
Actually, we went through a phase at the beginning where we tried 2 ingredient chocolate, at least for our dark chocolate, and we weren't impressed with the results.
Flavors like
Flavor
almond,
was
right.
okay, but the texture and also the use of chocolate was to make any bonbons out of that.
Like we use the chocolate to make more than bars. We're making chocolate to also sell as couverture to chefs, so they need a certain consistent workability. Some of the best chefs in Scotland are really happy to be supplying, and they say to me like, "Oh, you know, thank you. You make our job a lot easier." And so the chocolate is working for them, and that's with an 8% cocoa butter added to a Peruvian bean. Because of all the different beans, they have different fat contents themselves as well.
It is something you need to work around, absolutely. And you may not know this, but right, I was inspired to get into the chocolate business by discovering Bonat chocolate in 1994.
Yeah.
So it is. So I understand completely. And for me,
right.
And for me, texture is such a huge component of it, the experience, right? So that fat in cooking is flavor, fat delivers flavor.
Right
and
on.
So I always want something that gives me that unctuous round mouthfeel that adding cocoa butter will give over a 2-ingredient or something that has got less within it, although I understand why people use it. So let's go to the Gianduja bar. So hazelnuts don't grow in Scotland. You're getting them from Italy?
The hazelnuts are from Turkey now. So there was a patch there where we could get organic Piemonte hazelnuts, and we've been to Torino. We love Gianduja there. We learned a lot there. But getting organic certified, Piemonte hazelnuts, the Torino one, it's hard. Tonno Gentile, it's hard to get them. So inevitably, we buy organic Turkish ones, and the quality is great. They're fresh. They're really like, they have that hazelnut aroma we're looking for, and we're happy with the flavor we get. But I'll tell you, if I can get Italian ones, then I tend to.
So, I mean, what I like about Gianduja is, there are some that are very hazelnut forward. So they tend to be heavily roasted nuts. And, there's only so much hazelnut you can put in this before it won't temper properly.
Yeah.
It's about 40%. It's about 40% nuts, from my understanding. And it's all. And for me, it's. I'm sorry.
Well, how much is our hazelnut?
We put 30% in. If I make a bonbon, I put 40% in. But as a bar, it is too tricky to unmold unless you add a lot more extra cocoa butter as well.
Yes, because you're still tempering it, and it is the cocoa butter that crystallizes, and it's the fat in the hazelnuts that keeps the cocoa butter from crystallizing. It's a really
very fatty bar at 40% to be able to mold it. You can easily make a cuttable Gianduja with 40%, and at 50 we make a spread.
So for me, this bar is really all about the texture. You put it in your mouth, you bite it once or twice. I mean, the break is very, very soft, right? And the bite and the chew are exactly what you'd expect from the snap, right? But it's all about this. It just almost dissolves. It just comes and it's like fills out your mouth.
Yeah.
Right. It's a little bit sweet, but I would expect that giving, it's a 40% cocoa content in the bar. And you're not using any dairy in it. It says vegan.
Now we often use this one as in our portfolio as a kind of vegan alternative to milk chocolate. So that's another reason we make it. Yeah.
So, if you spent time in Turin, going to school on the two Guidos, Guido Gobino and Guido Castagna, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean it in a pejorative sense in Italian, because there actually are two Guidos
There's two Guidos both making Gianduja in Torino. Yeah.
out of Torino. And I have to admit that one of my favorite candies is Guido Gobino's olive oil and sea salt cremino. I don't know if you've had it.
No, we need
That
to go back
sounds
to
really
Torino.
good. Yeah,
now
we've
we have a
been
good
there,
reason to
but-
go back.
Welcome.
Yeah, no, you need to try this. It is my favorite of everything that he does. So for me, this is really nostalgic. Because I have to judge a lot of chocolate, right? When I'm eating recreationally, I just want something that puts a smile on my face. I put it in my mouth and I go, oh my gosh. And this is right in the wheelhouse of those things.
Really, me too. That's like a hazelnut bar kind of Levins's. A cup of tea is my sweet treat when I'm ready for something with a bit of sugar just to power through the morning. And yeah, exactly. We taste a lot of dark chocolate throughout the mornings as well. And this is kind of a refreshing, just delicious little break. Yeah.
No, so is 11's anything like second breakfast?
Yeah.
Well, it comes after the breakfast.
Comes after second breakfast. Okay.
Just before lunch.
Yeah.
We're big fans of the houses here.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Right. So the next one, so there are, as I recall, 2 bars here that are using the Peruvian cocoa, both Marañón. So this dark milk. 60% is still dark for a dark milk chocolate. What decided you to hit all the way up to 60%?
That was a very happy accident.
Okay.
At some point in the past, we had done some under-roasted Marañón 70% chocolate, which after a year of aging started to taste palatable. And I decided to turn it into a milk chocolate and wrote down the recipe of how to convert that 70% into a 48% milk chocolate. And Ali happily carried on after we used up all the under-roasted 70% to just substitute it with nibs in the next batch. And we ended up with a 60%, for which we won an award.
She did the math. Turned out to be a 60 that we're making another 48.
Yeah.
We got an award.
But that's why it tasted so delicious.
And we never stopped making it. That was 2015.
Yeah.
But I tell you, we have to stop making it because we can't get the beans anymore. Marañón cacao, I've had a shortage from, and I don't really know the full story behind that. So I know there's a lot of people out there who are like, oh my God, Marañón is such a special flavor. And it was we started using this beans in the beginning because Fortunato #4, one of the original Veltlin made chocolate couvertures that we were experimenting with, tasted so good. So we called up Dan and said, hey, we need your beans.
He didn't sell beans at the time.
No,
So but he made an exception for us and then saw the market of beans going.
Yeah, no, but they've had supply issues with the cocoa price. So enjoy. I love his chocolate. It's just.
So there are a couple of observations I would make. So anybody who's taken a class from me, excuse me, I'm still chewing. Anybody who's taken a class from me knows that I'm a huge fan of blending. And if you're in any kind of kitchen area, we have this notion of rework. I can take something that didn't turn out perfectly the first time and mix it in with something else and create something which surprises me. And one of the things that I like about the story of this bar is that it shows how you can take what you originally perceive of as a failure, right, and turn it into something which turns out to be one of your biggest sellers, right? If what you do is you throw away the notion that I can't blend. And I think I think that's a great story about this particular bar. Right? The other thing is that, again, this is right in my wheelhouse. When people ask me what my favorite style of chocolate is, dark milks, right? If I'm eating recreationally, a dark milk is where I go, right? And I'm not looking for a lot of varietal complexity. I'm not necessarily looking to hone in on, the origin of the milk and, finding something special about that. It's all about putting the bar in your mouth, biting down on it, and just going, right? And that's my reaction to this bar, right? Again, like the reaction to the Gianduja bar. It's just it's not. It shouldn't be thought of as a guilty pleasure.
It's not guilty. It's just
Right.
pleasure.
Well, many people say, you can't be a real chocolate lover if you like white chocolate, and I think there are some people who think that same way about milk chocolate.
There's a lot more things to feel guilty about than eating a piece of chocolate. But depending on the piece of chocolate, that's the thing. Like, actually, there's, we all know there's a lot of chocolate there that's carrying within it some pretty dark stories. I mean, I remember I was giving a guy a lift. He was hitchhiking in France, and a colored gentleman gave him a lift, and I offered him some of my chocolate, and he looked at me like, "No, you have no idea like what that means to me and my family. That's blood to me. Like my family has shed blood over what you're offering." So chocolate does mean a lot, but it shouldn't be guilty. And it shouldn't be a guilty pleasure. It should just be a pleasure which benefits people and the planet in all of the ways it's created. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think we're using guilty in a slightly different way, but I understand, right? I mean, when I use it, I'm using it as furtive. It's like it's something that I do for myself that I don't share with other people because they might think differently of me, right? And so I try to make sure that nobody feels stigmatized, right?
Loving other people starts with loving yourself, right? So
yeah,
right. I love yourself some chocolate, right, for sure. So I'm really happy that hits the note for you because it's just one of those special dark milks, and we're now replacing that with a new Peruvian origin, as we can't get the Marignon, and it's different. It's great.
Yeah.
It has a totally different profile, and it's really nice, but it's not the same. So nice to be enjoying this barbecue plate before. We'll see.
And I do have to say that, technically these are all well made. I haven't gone into that because there are other aspects, right?
Cool.
Is that there's no obvious defect, and the texture is right, the melt is right, there's no grittiness, the temper is, there's nothing about the chocolate itself or the bars we've had so far that calls attention to itself and says there's anything other than, oh, the people who spent time putting this together did everything they could in their power, right? Not to mess things up, not to mess things right. Thinking back to the old Art Pollard quote, the most important step about chocolate, well, every step is the most important step. So that's what's going. So let's talk about this next one.
About chocolate is, as a chocolate maker, don't sell anything which you're not happy with. So if you then it shouldn't make it to the customer. So that's why that under roasted chocolate was having the time to age for a year on our shelves, at least, before we turned it into milk chocolate. So if you're not happy with it, don't sell it. Don't just assume somebody might like it.
She does have a really interesting point, right? Because it's very tempting, especially in the beginning, to just get your product sold, and you kind of have to turn beans into chocolate, get it sold, And if you make chocolate that doesn't taste good, and you know it, then really the best thing for you and also the rest of us who are making chocolate this way is to use it to educate people and not try and sell it as good stuff, because you could pick people off from craft chocolate for that.
Well, that is one of the reasons why back in 2006, the growing group, right? So Sean Eskenazi, Alan McClure, Patrick, Art Pollard, Steve DeVries wanted to get together and form what they called the American Craft Chocolate Association, and didn't because they thought many people would mispronounce the word craft as crap, because there was lots of substandard chocolate around the time. So
skill. It takes a lot of effort, knowledge, machinery, and understanding how to use that machinery. And I appreciate you saying this is ticking the boxes for you, and because I know that how many steps have to be learned and controlled to get to a finished product. So it means a lot coming from you, Clay. Thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure, and I have to say that the last time I tried any of this was at Chocoa 2018 or 2020. So one of those two. So it's been a bunch of years. So I'm really happy you reached out to me about this question. Didn't want to get into a definition fight. I think I have answers for you, and I will send those to you privately. Right.
We've been time just on bean to bar and different methods, different machinery from melangers to ball mills. All of that stuff's going on, which we won't get into here.
So let's talk about the 100%. So this is Guatemalan lechua.
Cacao fruit. So we are tasting a cacao fruit bar.
Right.
So you tell us, and let's make sure we've made our packaging correct, so you've understood what we're having here.
Well, people don't understand people don't understand where chocolate comes from. They don't know cocoa beans, cocoa trees. They might understand about sugar or not. One of the things about, so are you using freeze-dried pulp or are you using pulp that has come some other way?
Freeze-dried.
So lyophilization, as the French would say. So one of the challenges with cocoa pulp as a sweetener is not only is it really sweet, but it's also real acidic, right? And so, and the acid there, what you want to make sure is that you're not bringing any of there's no fermentation byproduct, there's no acetic acid, right? There's just citric acid. Because the citric acid is what gets the fruity forwardness.
Right.
And so what you really want to do is you want to bring the pods into a facility. You want to disinfect the outside of the pods so that when you open it up, there's no yeast and no bacteria, which is going to kickstart fermentation. And now you can take the pulp in its sweetest state with no fermentation byproducts. So I don't know who's making.
Yeah. I didn't realize that so much, but I didn't think about it, capturing it before the acetic acid. Is that right? So you have the citric acid before it goes into fermentation.
Yeah, you definitely.
So you get those flavors. That's so interesting, Clay. What do you think?
So what's interesting about this is if you're taking the same sort of high temperature short roast approach to these Guatemalan beans, I understand the flavor of the underlying chocolate. It would be really interesting to taste the liquor before you sweeten it.
Well,
and the only thing,
a few different origins as well, and came to the decision that Guatemala was the one which worked best.
I can't tell the full story though, which is that we had Guatemala lechua from the previous harvest, and that's where we did our trials. Then we got the new harvest from Guatemala lechua. Very different bean. Still like fruit forward, but a lot more tricky to roast. And so we're using more of a through roast and actually giving this a bit longer after we did some experiments. And we're happy with what we're getting, which is, I hope you agree, like very citric acid, very fruity, like strong.
Lemony almost.
Yeah, like zingy, tart experience.
Yeah, so you do mention a number of different fruits. You do mention a number of fruits in your tasting notes. The citrus is the one that comes through for me more than the other ones. You mention some others. If I stretch, I might get the lychee, but strawberry for me.
Yeah, I struggle with tasting notes. Our wholesalers really wanted us to put them on there, and I understand why. I think it makes sense. And a lot of people have given me some good feedback and said, yeah, you got that right. Also the pairing, suggestions we put on there. But it's a hard one because tasting notes are for me very subjective, and I'm not that trained. Like neither of us are really good at that. And I meet people who are, and I'm like, wow. But just in practically, it's difficult to find
we
time
like to eat chocolate, so we
things.
don't think about the notes as much.
So I pair lychee, citrus, and strawberry. I agree. I think lychee was almost a reference to the cacao fruit in its untreated form, and it's kind of more of its texture and things. Maybe more.
That is very true. The only note that I would make it, although it is 100% cacao fruit, right? There's also
cacao.
Yeah. So just
there's also a cacao percentage.
Yeah, that's right. We do not actually call it a chocolate. You might notice on the packaging.
It's not what I
We call it 100% cacao, and it's a cacao fruit bar. So the 100% refers to the cacao. It does not refer to the cocoa solids on the
I
spot.
understand, right? But as a geek or nerd, I
Yes.
always love to know, in terms of the standard recipe, how much of this comes from the cacao bean, right, as opposed to how much is the sweetener. I don't see that anywhere here.
62% is from bean, 8% is from butter, and 30% is from cacao fruit.
You can infer it from the organic percentage of ingredients, because the cacao sugar is the only one which is not organic certified. But
So I have to read the ingredients list closely and be like Rachel Riley on 8 out of 10 cats and do the maths.
Do you normally do that?
Because the statement would have made it really tricky, because the wording would have had to be, if we wanted to put the
On the
cacao
back.
percentage
On the back,
Yeah, we could
just explicate it a little more clearly on the back.
behind
we
it.
totally missed over. Like, we're just about to print new packs.
We
so
can do it on the new pack.
You've told us just in time, because we're literally just
Yeah.
signing off.
Right.
I think
So
what
it does say 70% of ingredients are organically certified, which means that if the cacao fruit sugar is the only non-organic, I know that it's 70%.
But I think the way to
It's
put
not
it
fair.
on would be to put 30% after the cacao fruit
Yeah,
juice.
to quit it.
Yeah.
Put it. That's what we should have done. We can do
Labeling's
that.
always, this is the thing. We print, 5,000 at a time or so of these labels. So you get a chance to improve it. I mean, that will last us a few months. And then,
We actually ran out of them, so we're
yeah, it's one of our
just
fastest
saying.
selling. If you guys haven't tried it out there, try the cacao fruit. It's the first of its kind, commercially really available in the UK, and we're now sending that to America as well.
Right.
So it's getting some pretty good reviews and some awards and all that kind of stuff.
I can tell you the only truly inedible chocolate I have ever had from Velklin is their version of this bar.
Really, I'll have to
What
try
happened?
that.
Well, not only did they have the heavy citric component, and for me it was just way too citric, right? But it also brought with it the ferment funk. There was an acetic component to it, which was just
really interesting, because
Yeah.
we're trying different suppliers for cacao fruit, and you just told me something that's I'll be able to distinguish and flavor, because there's also dehydrated cacao fruit and freeze dried. So, yeah, super interesting. Good feedback on this bar too. So, innovative, and that's just what we like to do. We like to blaze trails where we can, and I think there'll be more cacao fruit bars in the future. And why not? It's a great thing to do. It's we're trying to make products for a little bit more extraordinary and just push things forward.
Right.
Along with
Well,
a lot of other
people may not know this, but if we think about 4 million metric tons of dry cocoa, that's 10 million metric tons of wet cocoa.
Yeah.
And my experience says that for every ton of cocoa, there's an average, when you do it across all genetics, of about 100 liters of juice.
Yeah, some have more, some
So
have less.
that's 10, it's like what, 10 billion liters of juice that just, right, of high acid juice that is allowed to escape. And so if you can find other things to do with it. What I will say here is that the balance of acidity and the citric component with the chocolate is a really delicate line to run, right? I've tasted a bunch of these with, unadulterated cacao sugar. And this is among, the top 3 to 5 that I have tasted ever,
Awesome.
right, in this. If people are interested in, in finding a baseline for this bar, right, try this one and then try someone else, and you'll see what it is that I mean. It is really, really challenging to do. But let's get to the next part, because we're a couple of minutes over, and I want to respect your time. It's getting late, right? You're what, 8 hours, 9 hours ahead of me here.
That's good. It's great to see you and catch up a little bit. It was like a few years since.
So,
for the benefit of people at home, let's not wander on too much.
Why Lefroy? Why Lefroy?
Why Lefroy? Great question. Well, it divides opinions, and that's something we like to do too. But we did try Speyside. We tried, our local one is Glenkinchie. It's a lovely sweet whiskey. distillery we have down the road on the East Coast, and there's not many distilleries where we are. So that would have been our preference, but
it gets completely lost.
Got lost. It's our methodology.
Yeah.
So this was again an innovative idea. I did have this idea in my bed at night. I was thinking about it because we'd hatched this plan to take nibs to the island of Islay, where all the peat smoking whiskey comes from. Put the nibs in a barrel, leave it there for 6 months, come back, get the barrel, make the chocolate from the nibs, make a story. It would be cool marketing. And also, hopefully the chocolate would be nice. Never did that though, because I'm too busy all the time. So, meantime, I'm thinking about it because people are asking us, you've got to do a whiskey chocolate bar because you're Scottish, right? It's just, but you can't just take whiskey and pour it in the chocolate. So one night I thought, you know what, why don't we just soak cocoa nibs in whiskey and let them get all the flavor in there, and then we'll evaporate off the whiskey and use them as an inclusion in the bar. So we did it. And it worked straight away. It was like a very simple, effective process. And as a result, the angels get a very good share from us through the evaporation of all the whiskey.
Yeah. But if we want to make a flavored bar, we always want to make sure that the flavor is truly tastable. So we don't want to skimp on any of the flavoring. So that's why we weren't happy with just a hint of whiskey here. So it needed to be identifiable as really tasting like whiskey. So a Lefroy lends itself to it. Is not only very peaty, but it's also very smoky. So both of those flavors stay while the alcohol content disappears.
Yeah, it punched through with the flavor.
Yeah.
And
it was a natural pairing with the Maragnon chocolate as well. It worked really well.
We found the Maragnon cacao was great. In fact, we're going to have to find a new one because of the Maragnon situation, and we'll dramatically change the flavor profile of this bar if we use different cacao.
So I first learned about Lefroy without knowing how to pronounce it when I was about 12. Laprohaig, however you're going to do it. Right? Through reading the book The Eiger Sanction by Trevanian. So the protagonist is a huge Lefroy fan. And then I had one of my favorite dining experiences in New Orleans. So I went to a restaurant, and the restaurant has a policy of treating single diners to an after dinner shot. Anything in their drinks menu. And so I said, bring me something, and they brought me a Lefroy. And so I have this wonderful, this idea of Lefroy in my mind from those two experiences. What I would say is, number one is that not refining in the nibs, but leaving them as an inclusion, very, very fine inclusion, is the texture here is really, really nice. So they are present, but not overwhelming.
Right. And
they're soft because they have been soaked in the whiskey. Yeah. Knowing what Lefroy tastes like, right? The real forward peatiness of it and smokiness of it is muted here. And for me, it's the vanilla and the oak. And you do pair with what you say, pair with wildflower honey. I get that component of it. Right? But I think you're absolutely right. If you had a less assertive whiskey, it would be a less successful bar. I mean, you want something which is just smacks you in the face, right, on the glass, right, with something.
And add to the chocolate before it becomes like porridge, and you cannot temper it anymore as well. So
no, absolutely.
Brilliant technique.
Yeah,
absolutely. So while
when you say whiskey on a bar, like I guess it's a bit like chili. You don't want someone to see chili. Oh, I'm looking forward to this, and then it underwhelms. Like any flavor, really. And I think I read that in the International Chocolate Awards judging criteria. It's like if you're going to call it a flavor, then make sure it tastes like that flavor.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think that calling it whiskey on the front and then saying Lefroy on the back is the right way to do it. Right.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is you're delivering an identifiable whiskey note to it. I mean, it's identifiably a brown spirit, right? But not having something which is so overpowering, right? So many people will love a blended Scotch, right? But they wouldn't necessarily go to a fully peated, single malt, right? And this again, it strikes that balance. There is that balance that you're running, and you're doing it extremely well, which I think is
they mean a lot to me as well. The flavors, senses bring memories, and so you have peat smoke, whiskey. I mean, I've had childhood memories and holiday memories from being on the beach with a fire,
of bouncing on your grandpa's lap in the pub while he's
evocative experience that. Certainly the whiskey one captures you for me because of those taste elements.
Right. Well, and I don't know, you can't really tell now, but at one point I had hair the same color as yours. Never quite had a beard as long as yours, right? Our last names do both begin with G and O, so there is that.
Well, looking forward to your visit over here. We'll share a dram.
Please.
We'll come down to the beach and have a dram with us at some point.
Well, certainly the next time I am going to be in the UK, I will make sure that I get north into Scotland. So the final bar we have Aztec Spice. Again, there's a hint of it on the nose. It is not overwhelming, which I think is really, really nice. So you're using beans from Tabasco for this.
Yes.
So from Agrofloresca. Have you spent any?
Say again, sorry.
No, you're using beans from Tabasco. I'm guessing from Agrofloresta.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So those beans are from Agrofloresta, Hugo Chavez in Tabasco, working with Mayan farmers. A bit of like ancient Criollo genetics in there somewhere, hybridized with a lot of whatever is growing around that area. We should have the Criollo conversation another time. That'd be a good one. But and so while you're enjoying that, this bar is Aztec spice, not Mayan spice, because the Aztecs had access to almonds because of the Spanish. So we have in this bar 10% almonds, 70% cacao. So you're really looking at like 20% sugar. So it's a less sweet part. But that sugar is added at the very end of the process in the kind of Mexican bollito, the one, taza style, stone ground style they call it. So the sugar is not ground into the chocolate, it's added at the very end, along with the cinnamon and the chili. And so here, let me go over that again. Chocolate and almonds and sugar. Chocolate and almonds ground together, sugar and spices added at the end. Summarizes Mexico Aztec spice.
No, so what it does is so the chilies that you're using, again, it's easy to overwhelm, and they're not on the nose, they're not on the first, they're not on the initial flavor, right? And there's a very, very delicately at the very end on the finish, there's this little bit of heat in the center, but the throat back down behind. So if somebody is, my daughter's boyfriend is like not a spice person, right? But really loves, Mexican food. And this is exactly the kind of chocolate that he would like, right? Because he's not.
California Reaper going to burn your head off on the pack. It's not one of those.
No. Right. And one thing that many people also don't know about chocolate like this is when you don't fully refine in the sugar, at any given percentage, it will seem sweeter.
That's right.
Because the sugar crystals are not covered with fat, right? Which you would get from a long refine and conch to mix things together. And so again, getting something which has got this under-refined sugar into it, right? Balancing the sweetness here becomes a real challenge. So this is not really forward when it comes to the Aztec spice aspect of this, right? The cinnamon is there as a hint. Is there also nutmeg or just cinnamon?
Cinnamon
it's
and
just
chili.
cinnamon.
Yeah.
We used to have a previous version which didn't have the almonds in it, and it had some nutmeg and what else?
Yeah,
Some
black pepper.
clove.
I think back in the,
Yeah,
we've had
it
different
wasn't.
renditions of this bar.
It was a bit too strong.
And it was an 80% straight up cocoa sugar. It was too rough.
Yes, it wasn't
flavor.
as satisfying. So adding the almonds really rounded it off. So it's a perfect balance.
And the almonds are very traditional. I mean, if you go to Oaxaca and someplace like Mayordomo, and you're asking them to grind a hot chocolate mixture for you in the store, it will be chocolates and almonds and sugar and cinnamon. That will be the ingredients. And so in that respect,
there's an old lady in Palenque that I spent like an afternoon with, and she made these chocolate discs using the things you tie your garden hose together with, as you know, a mold cutter. And I just watched her and videoed her, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Like we can do a bit of that, and we had ideas further on about the almonds. But the main thing we don't put it on chocolate was she put loads of corn oil into hers,
right?
Like loads. You're like, ooh, looks like big GMO corn oil is not going to make it into our.
No.
I love the chocolate. But, to learn from that. Yeah.
But given the importance of corn into the diet in that part of Mexico, it does make sense in some respects to think about it. So for me, in a chocolate bar, my preference would for this to be much more present in terms of the chili and the cinnamon. And I would say, yeah, go put the black pepper back in there but that's just me, right? But if I'm thinking about the Scottish palate, where putting anything, so smoked paprika on top of a potato is like over the top spice, right? You might think
you're in Arizona where there's a lot of good tacos around, and
we've got Indian food here, but people tend to find chili quite hot.
Yeah. So we're not doing a lot of vindaloo. Perhaps we're doing something which is a little. But again, this is where the preference is. Again, what I would say is that if somebody is a fan of Taza chocolate, they like that texture, and you're looking for another example of it, which is, again, it's towing this line, right? In terms of the flavors and delivering a sophisticated flavor experience, not just one that beats you over the head, right?
Yeah, I think that's what we're going for too. It's like more. I mean, as we said with the whiskey, we want you to taste those flavors, but we don't want to beat you over the head with them. It really is.
It should be enjoyable.
Yeah, especially.
And I would say that about every single one of them, right?
Cool.
So I make a lot of different musical allusions, right? Because one reason why is I spent 3.5 years as a DJ when I was in my late teens and early 20s, and I like the idea of the way I would describe a great band is I would want to play both sides of their albums and all of their albums. Right. That was sort of my definition of a great band. They made a lot of music. But if I said a good band would be, I like 3 or 4 of their albums and I'll play 1 or 2 songs off of each side.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And I make that same distinction when I come to a chocolate maker. I'm just not going to assume that every chocolate maker will make things that are to my taste.
Of course.
And I'll say, I like these ones and I don't like those ones. Right. Or in a sense, they're not to my taste. But one of the things about these 6 is that each of them delivered an interesting tasting experience, right? All well made, technically. I mean, you can't say anything bad about anything, right, about them. And all of them, when you pay attention to them, so rewarded paying attention to them, which is one of the things I like in my chocolate, right? Even if I'm just going to put something in my mouth and go, it puts a smile on my face. If I do want to pay attention to it, I'll go, yeah, there's something there. It rewards paying attention. And I would say that about all 6 of these bars, right? That they've delivered that experience for me.
Our challenge, Freddie, is to make something that Clay doesn't like. We're going to put ourselves to work. We'll find something.
Right. So what I would do is I would wait until I come and visit, and then let's try to do something together.
Yeah.
Right. I could tell you right now, freeze dry some haggis.
We have a haggis bar.
We have a haggis bar.
Yeah.
vegetarian.
I'm willing.
Yeah.
No. Vegetarian haggis is not a thing.
No, it's a haggis spice, so it's the spices of the haggis.
Yeah.
Only.
That's not haggis. It's haggis adjacent. It's haggis adjacent.
It's not. Haggis is the inside of a sheep. But anyway, yeah, that's great coming from you, and really, really nice to hear. I do think that we can't please everybody, and we're not trying to please everybody with our chocolate. It's more, we make the chocolate that we like to eat, and ones that we want to, like, in terms of the ingredients we put in, like I always say, I wouldn't make anything I wouldn't feed to my own children. And a lot of the flavor spectrums and the type of cocoa we use and the location from where it's coming from are also linked to like personal ties and personal stories and personal preferences. So we're really making the kind of chocolate we like. And,
yeah, also we're trying to kind of combat the overly sweet culture in Scotland. So we want to bring nice treats to people which don't ruin their health. So our style is adding less than usual amounts of sugar.
Just encouraging them over to the darker side of things, because there's a lot of sweet in the country, a lot. And, chocolatiers, they could choose better couverture. They don't want to use the super sweet milk white Valrhona Calico. So, really education and getting chocolate in the hands of chefs and pastry chefs who can serve it on a menu, and then people go, wow, okay, it doesn't need to just be this crack candy experience when we have chocolate. That does lead to health problems. And Scotland has its fair share.
Right. So I want to say thank you to both of you. We've run long, and I want to thank you for your willingness to stay on. But there's one final question. If you're in Scotland, obviously you can order it online, or you can find retailers. If I'm in the U.S., is there a retailer in the U.S., or am I buying it from Cocoa Runners or something like that?
And the best place right now, I have to put a shout out to the Chocolate Dispensary in Los Angeles. So, yeah, get in touch with those guys at the Chocolate Dispensary. They just got a big order. There's also Chocolate Explorer up in Seattle. And
if all else fails, you can still order it from our website directly from Scotland. So if you're willing to
the shipping, but we will send it directly to you now. We're doing
okay, right. But what I will do is I will put links to the Chocolate Dispensary and the Chocolate Explorer on the post for this episode.
Bar and Cocoa, Pashmina over at Bar and Cocoa.
And Bar and Cocoa as well?
Chocolate Dispensary. Jack at Chocolate Cupboard in San Francisco hasn't been in touch for a while. Jack, shout out to you. We've got chocolate for you, new products and great stuff. So really, we're looking at a relaunch of our chocolate. It's the never-ending beginning that we're in. We just launched 70-gram bars. Those are the ones we're trying today. If you need them right now, then Chocolate Dispensary can contact you.
Gotcha.
Nice.
All right, and with that, I want to point out that this is the post for this episode on the Chocolate Life. You can go there. I will put links on this post to the Chocolate Dispensary and the Chocolate Explorer. You can learn more about it. Here are the 6 bars that we tasted. They're listed here, so you can find more. This is the homepage of the Chocolate Life. This episode of PodSaveChocolate, like every episode of PodSaveChocolate, is sponsored by you, the members of the Chocolate Life. So click on the green button and join. There's always a free membership. Of course, if you do have the resources to support me financially, the work that I do, that's always great. And thank you both very much. It's been a real pleasure to reconnect with you, because I haven't seen you in person since 2020. And I am excited to have tasted, this part of your journey where you've come since then, and want to visit you in Scotland the next time I'm there, and to take the next step along and understand the next steps along your path. So it's been a real, real pleasure.
Excellent. Yeah. So it's been 20 years, and we're looking forward to 20 more. Just a huge thank
you. Oh, that's right. That's your 20th anniversary this year. So that's very, very cool.
Should have a party. So you're all invited. Huge thanks to your members as well. It's great to see this community just growing and more people understanding what is going on. And really success to your journey too. It's been wonderful to watch.
I appreciate that as well. And with that, I want to remind everybody as I sign off every single episode of PodSaveChocolate, If you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everybody, ciao.